Hello, welcome to Untold Travel Stories. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey across the world, from one end of the earth to the other. Told in a way you have never heard before, dim the lights in your room, lean back and let the sound of this video carry you. I do not know exactly how I arrived in India. I only remember that one morning I opened my eyes, and the air was different, heavier, sweeter. A scent I had never known before, spice, smoke, wet earth, and something else. Something older, something that smelled like time itself. I lay still for a long time, with my eyes open, just breathing. Because in this new world, waking up in a strange place was always a kind of small death and a small birth at the same time. You did not know who you were, you did not know where you were, and for a moment you did not need to know either. I sat up slowly. I was on the floor of a small room. The walls were painted blue, a blue so deep it looked like the inside of the ocean. The paint was peeling in places, but the color was still alive. A single window, and through the window light, soft, golden, morning light. A wooden ceiling fan above me, motionless of course, nothing moved by electricity in this world anymore. The fan was only a memory of cool air. I stood up. My legs were tired in a way that told me I had walked for a long time before reaching this room. How long? I did not remember. That was the way the journey worked now. The walking remembered itself. My body kept the record. My mind only kept fragments. I walked to the window, I pushed open the wooden shutters, and I saw a city I did not recognize, but a city I felt I had been waiting for my entire life. Narrow streets. Old buildings the color of dried clay and faded ochre, wooden balconies leaning over the alleys, faded signs in a script I could not read, but a script that felt familiar in the way old things feel familiar, even when you have never seen them. Cows, yes, cows, standing peacefully in the middle of an empty street. I had not seen cows in a long time. They were thin, but alive. Their eyes were calm. They looked up at my window without any fear. And in the distance, past the rooftops, past the temples, I saw a river, a wide, slow silver river, moving like something that had no need to hurry, because it had been moving for so long that hurry had stopped meaning anything to it. The Ganges, I knew it without being told, because some rivers announced themselves. I left the room. I walked down a narrow stone staircase. The stones were worn in the middle, the way stairs become worn after 1,000 years of feet. I stepped out into the alley. The air was warm. The silence was full, empty. Of course it was empty. There was no one. There had been no one for a long time now. But the city did not feel dead. The city felt asleep, as if at any moment a door might open, a child might run out, a bell might ring, a woman might call someone home for lunch. Of course none of this happened. I began walking toward the river. The alleys twisted and turned, climbed and dropped. Sometimes the path was so narrow my shoulders almost touched the walls on both sides. In one corner, a small shrine, a statue of an elephant-headed god, Ganesha. I knew his name. From where, I did not know. There were dried flower garlands around his neck. Marigolds, once orange, now brown, fragile as old paper. In front of the statue, a small bowl. Inside the bowl, a few grains of rice. Old, but still there. Someone had left them, as an offering, a long time ago, and no one had come to clear them away. I looked at Ganesha for a long time, his small painted eyes, his broken trunk, the faint smile that had been carved into him by a sculptor who had probably been dead for 100 years, and I bowed to him, not because I believed, but because he had been waiting, and waiting deserves respect. I kept walking. I passed houses with their doors open. Some doors were carved with patterns that must have taken weeks of work. Others were simple, painted blue or green, the paint cracking. In one doorway I saw a pair of small leather sandals, a child's sandals, placed neatly side by side, as if the child had just kicked them off and run inside. I did not look further. Some things you see and you walk past. You do not stop, because stopping would break something inside you that you need to keep whole. I came to a small open square. In the middle of the square, a stone water trough, long and shallow, for animals, empty now, dry, cracked. I sat on its edge for a moment, to rest. The morning sun was beginning to climb higher. The air was still cool, but I could feel the heat that would come later. A small bird landed on the other end of the trough. A sparrow. It looked at me, tilted its head, and then it flew down to a tiny puddle of rainwater that had collected in a crack of the stone. It drank, quickly. Then it flew away. A small life. Going on, without me, without anyone. I watched the place where the sparrow had been, and I smiled. I reached the river. Wide stone steps led down to the water. The Ghats. I knew this word too, from somewhere, from some other life. I walked down the steps slowly. There must have been 100 of them, maybe more, each one warm with the morning sun, each one carrying the marks of millions of feet that had walked here before mine. I sat on the lowest step, just above the water. The Ganges moved past me, slow, wide, silver in the morning light. And I looked, just looked, because some rivers you do not look at to understand them. You look at them to be looked at. This river had carried millions of prayers, millions of ashes, millions of tears, millions of laughters, millions of small clay lamps floating on its surface at evening, lit by hands that had wished for things, for a healthy child, for a kind husband, for rain, for forgiveness, for thousands of years. And now it was carrying nothing, only itself, only its own slow movement toward the sea. I took the watch from my pocket, the same watch, silver, old, stopped at 11:04. I had carried it across so many countries, and it was still with me. I held it to my ear. The ticking was still there, faint, but there. I will come back to you, M. I had read those words 1,000 times, and I still did not know who M was, but I had stopped trying to know. Some questions become friends. They walk beside you, they keep you company, and answering them would only mean losing them. I sat by the river for a long time. A long-legged bird flew across the water. Just one. Grey. A heron, maybe. It landed on a stone in the middle of the river. It stood completely still, looking at the water. And I thought, we are doing the same thing, the bird and I, both of us looking at a river that no longer carries anyone. But the river did not mind. The river had never minded. After a while I stood up, I walked along the Ghats. Old wooden boats lay on the steps, painted in faded colors, blue, yellow, green, their paint cracked, their wood softened by years of sun and rain. Some had filled with rainwater, some had small plants growing inside them, tiny green things sprouting from the cracks in the boards. In one boat I saw a small bell, brass, hanging from a rope tied to the wooden mast. I touched it very gently. It rang, a small, clear sound, across the silent river, across the silent city. I closed my eyes, and I listened to the sound as it traveled, as it crossed the water, as it touched the buildings on the far bank, as it faded, as it became part of the silence again. That sound was the first sound I had made in India, and the city had heard it. I am sure of that. I walked further along the Ghats. I passed a place where the stones were stained black. Old soot, old fire. I knew what this place was, without anyone telling me. This was where the dead had been burned, for thousands of years. Bodies wrapped in white cloth, carried down the steps by sons and brothers, placed on wooden pyres, offered to the river, to the fire, to whatever came next. The fires had gone out. There was no one left to bring the dead, no one left to be the dead. The fire had simply ended. I stood at the edge of the burning Ghat, and I felt a strange peace, because all those people who had been burned here, all of them had been let go, by someone who loved them, by the river, by the fire. And now the world itself had been let go, by someone, by something we did not know. But the letting go was the same letting go. The Ganges had been preparing us for this for thousands of years, teaching us by example how to release. And now the lesson was complete. I climbed back into the alleys. I walked deeper into the old city. The streets grew narrower, the buildings taller, wooden balconies almost touching above my head, leaving only a thin strip of sky. I came to a small temple. Its doors were open. I went inside. The interior was dark, cool. The smell of old incense in the stones, a smell that had soaked into the walls for so many centuries that it had become part of the building itself. In the center, a small altar, a statue of a goddess. Her face calm, her eyes half closed, carved from black stone, smoothed by the touch of countless hands. In front of her, a clay lamp, a diya, the oil long gone, the wick black with old smoke. But beside the lamp, a small jar, sealed with wax. I picked it up, I broke the seal. Inside, oil, dark, thick. Still good, I poured a little oil into the lamp. I trimmed the wick with my fingernail. I took my lighter from my pocket, and I lit the lamp. A small flame, yellow, trembling, then steady. The first light in this temple in, who knows how many years, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe more. The goddess's face came alive in the flame, her cheeks, her closed eyes, the faint curve of her lips. She was smiling, or she had always been smiling, and only now could anyone see it. I sat on the cool stone floor in front of the lamp for a long time. I did not pray, I did not know any prayers, but I said in my own language, very softly, "Thank you for waiting." And the goddess, of course, did not answer, but the flame moved a little, as if a breath had touched it. Maybe it was the breath of the air, maybe it was something else. I did not need to know which. Before I left the lamp burning. I did not put it out. Maybe a few hours, maybe a day, until the oil ran out. But while it burned, the goddess would not be in the dark. That was something. That was maybe the only thing I could give her. By the time I came out of the temple, the sun was high, the day was warming. I was tired, and I was hungry. I found a small house at the corner of an alley with its door half open. I went inside. The house had 2 rooms, a main room with a low bed and a wooden chest, and a kitchen with a clay stove and a small window that looked out onto a courtyard with a single lemon tree. The lemon tree was still alive. 3 small yellow lemons hung from its branches. I went out and picked one. It smelled fresh, sharp, real. I sat on the edge of the courtyard with the lemon in my hand, and I almost laughed. A lemon after everything. A lemon growing in a courtyard in an empty city, waiting for someone to pick it. And I had picked it. In the kitchen, I found a clay pot on the cold stove. Inside the pot, dried lentils, still good. On the shelf, a small bag of rice, a jar of salt, a few dried red chilies hanging from a string, a small tin of turmeric, a jar of something that smelled like cumin, all the small ingredients of an ordinary meal, waiting on a shelf, for a meal that had never been cooked. I lit the stove with wood from the courtyard. I cooked the lentils with the rice, with water from a clay jug that had been waiting on the counter. I added a pinch of salt, a pinch of turmeric, half of a dried chili, and finally a squeeze of the lemon. When the food was ready, I sat on the floor of the kitchen. I ate with my hands. The way I knew somehow, this food was meant to be eaten. It was warm, simple. The taste of the spices, the taste of the earth, and I cried. I did not know why. Maybe because someone long ago had bought these lentils, had stored them carefully in this clay pot, had imagined a meal that would be cooked, had imagined a family eating it, had imagined an ordinary evening, and the meal had finally been cooked, years later, by a stranger, in an empty house, in an empty city. But the meal had happened, and the imagination of that long-ago cook had become real, even if she would never know. That night I slept on the bed in the main room. The blanket smelled of dust, but also, faintly, of something that had once been a home, of the kind of cloth that has been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. And in my dreams I heard bells, many bells, the bells of 1,000 temples, ringing across a city full of life, across a river full of small lit lamps, across rooftops where laundry hung. across courtyards where children chased each other. I woke up before dawn. The bells were still in my head. I lay still in the dark, listening to them, and I thought they are still ringing. Somewhere, in some layer of time that has not yet been folded away. They are still ringing, and one day someone will hear them again. I spent 2 more days in Varanasi, walking the alleys, sitting by the river, lighting small lamps in temples whenever I found oil, eating from the kitchens of houses I had never known. And on the 3rd morning, I knew it was time to go. Because the river had told me, in its slow way, the road is north. Follow me upstream, I will lead you to where the air becomes thin. And there, you will know what to do next. I packed a small bag, a blanket, some rice, some dried lentils, the lemon I had not finished, a clay cup I had found in the kitchen, because I had grown attached to it for no reason I could explain, and I left the house with the door open behind me, the way I had found it. I walked down to the river one more time. I sat on the lowest step of the Ghat. The Ganges was the same as it had been on my first morning, slow, silver, wide. I took the watch from my pocket. I held it to my ear. The ticking was still there. I am going north, I said. To the river, to the watch, to M, wherever M was. The river did not answer, but a small fish jumped far out in the middle of the water. The smallest splash. Almost nothing. I took it as an answer. I stood up. I shouldered my bag. I began to walk. Out of Varanasi, along the road that followed the river. Upstream, north, toward whatever was waiting. And as I walked, I felt that the city was watching me go, without sadness, without holding me back. The way an old teacher watches a student leave the classroom for the last time, knowing the lesson has been given, knowing the student must now walk on alone. The road out of Varanasi was a road I did not need a map to follow. The river was my map. The river was my guide. As long as the Ganges was on my left, I was going in the right direction. For the first day I walked along a paved road, old asphalt, cracked, grass growing through the cracks. In some places the asphalt had broken away entirely, and there was only dirt and stone. The road had once been a busy road, I could tell, because every few kilometers there was an abandoned vehicle, a small truck, a rickshaw, a motorcycle, all of them empty, all of them slowly being eaten by rust and rain, in one truck. I looked inside the cabin. There was a small string of beads hanging from the mirror, wooden beads, and a small picture of a god taped to the dashboard. The picture had faded almost to nothing, but the smile of the god was still visible. The driver had left. The god had stayed. I walked beside the road, not on it. The shoulder was softer, easier on my feet. To my left, the Ganges, wider here than in the city, slower, browner, carrying silt from places far upstream. To my right, fields, endless fields. Once they had been rice, wheat, sugarcane. Now they were wild, tall grass, wildflowers I did not know the names of, yellow, pink, white, a whole country of flowers growing for no one. In the late afternoon I came to a small village, 12 or 15 houses, mud walls, thatched roofs that had begun to collapse on a few of them, a single well in the center, a peepal tree beside the well, its leaves whispering in the warm wind. I stopped at the well. I lowered the wooden bucket on its rope, down, down, down. The rope was longer than I expected. The well was deep. When the bucket finally hit water, I felt the change in the rope. I pulled it up slowly, hand over hand. The water was cold, clear. It tasted of stone and something faintly sweet. I drank. Then I poured a little over my head and shoulders. The cold made me gasp. Then it made me laugh. Laughter in an empty world sounds like a small wild bird that has escaped from a cage. I sat under the peepal tree. Its leaves were heart-shaped. They moved even when there was no wind. I had read that somewhere. That peepal leaves move on their own. I watched the leaves, and the leaves watched me. After a while, I noticed something at the base of the tree, a small stone, painted red. Someone had painted it. A long time ago. The red was faded, but still visible. And around the stone a few dried flowers, and 3 small clay figures, a shrine. The smallest kind of shrine. The kind a village makes for itself without needing a temple. I touched the stone. I did not pray, I just touched it, and said, in my mind, I see you, someone painted you, someone brought flowers, someone made these little figures with their hands. I see all of that. I will remember it for them. I slept that night in one of the village houses, the smallest one, closest to the well. There was a small wooden bed inside, a thin cotton mattress, a folded sheet on top. I unfolded the sheet. It was white with a small embroidered pattern of flowers along the edge. Someone had stitched those flowers by hand. In the evenings, maybe. By candlelight. I slept under that sheet, and in my dreams I saw a woman embroidering by a window. Her hands were old. Her eyes were tired, but she was smiling. I did not see her face clearly, but she was happy. That was the important part. I woke at dawn. I folded the sheet again, carefully, along the same lines it had been folded before. I placed it back on the bed, the way you leave a guest room when you have been welcomed. I walked for many days like this, following the river, sleeping in villages, drinking from wells, eating whatever I found in the kitchens of houses where the doors had been left open. The world had been left open, everywhere. It was as if all the people, when they understood what was coming, had decided together, we will not lock anything. We will leave it all open, for whoever comes after us, for whoever needs. I do not know if it really happened that way, but I want to believe it did. In one village, I found a school, a single room, a blackboard, 10 or 12 wooden benches, a small wooden desk for the teacher, and on the blackboard in white chalk, a half-finished lesson, numbers. A simple addition, 2 plus 3. The answer was not written. The teacher had been called away, or had stopped, or had simply forgotten to finish. I picked up a piece of chalk from the floor. The chalk was small, half used. I walked to the blackboard and I wrote 5. Then I stepped back and looked at the answer. A small thing, a child's answer, but it had been waiting for someone to come and finish the lesson. I had finished it. And I felt that somewhere, a teacher I would never meet was finally able to close her notebook and go home. I walked around the classroom. I touched the wooden benches. I imagined the children who had sat on them, their small bodies, their bare feet, their notebooks open in front of them, their voices repeating numbers after their teacher. In one corner of the room, a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside, small things. A dried flower pressed between 2 pages of an old notebook. A marble, a piece of red string, a button, a child's treasures, the treasures children keep without knowing why. I closed the box. I left it where it was. These were not mine to take. I slept that night in the schoolhouse, on the wooden floor, with my blanket beneath me, and in the morning, before I left, I went to the blackboard one more time. I picked up the chalk, and below the 2 plus 3 equals 5, I wrote one more line, thank you for teaching. In English, because that was the only language I had left to thank in. The teacher would never read it, but the words were there now. And maybe, in the strange way time works, the teacher had already felt them. Years ago, on the day she had stopped teaching, a small warm feeling for no reason. From a stranger, from the future, the road continued. The river continued. I continued. The land began to change, slowly, after many days. The flat plains gave way to gentle hills. The fields became smaller. The villages became simpler, stone houses instead of mud. Thicker walls. The people who had built these houses had been preparing for cold, for mountains. I was walking toward the mountains. I could feel them, even before I could see them. The way the air changed, the way the light changed, the way the wind began to carry a different smell. A smell of pine, of snow, of stone that had never been warm. In one village in the foothills, I found a small temple beside a stream. Not a grand temple, just a small shelter built of stone, with a single bell hanging from a wooden beam at the entrance. I rang the bell. Once, the sound was clear, bright, higher than the bell in Varanasi. The bell of a mountain temple sounds different from the bell of a river temple. I do not know why, but it does. Inside the temple, a small statue, worn smooth by weather and time. I could not tell which god it was. The face had been almost erased, but on the floor in front of the statue, someone had arranged small white pebbles in the shape of a circle. Recently? Long ago? I could not tell. I knelt and looked at the circle of pebbles. I counted them. 17. Why 17? I did not know, but the number felt deliberate, felt chosen. I added one more pebble from the stream outside. A small white one I had picked up on the way in, 18. The next traveler would find 18, and maybe they would add one more, 19. This was how the world would continue, now. One small pebble at a time, one small kindness at a time, from strangers to strangers across years. I sat by the stream outside the temple for a long time, watching the water. The water here was different from the Ganges, faster, clearer, colder. It came from somewhere high up, from snow. I cupped some in my hands and drank. It tasted of mountain. There is a taste that water has when it has been a glacier, a taste that nothing else has, like the cold inside a stone. That afternoon I walked higher. The road steepened. My legs began to ache in a different way. The good ache, the ache of climbing towards something. By evening I had reached a place where I could look back and see the plains below me. The whole great plain of India, golden in the late light, stretching south as far as the eye could see. Somewhere down there was Varanasi. Somewhere down there was the river that had brought me this far. I stood looking south for a long time. Then I turned and looked north. The mountains were there, not yet the Himalayas themselves, but their first messengers, tall hills covered in dark forest, and behind them, fainter, just barely visible in the distance, the white peaks, like the edge of a dream, like a promise of something larger than anything I had ever seen. I sat down on a stone by the side of the road. I took the watch from my pocket. I opened it. I will come back to you. M. I held the watch up so it could see the mountains too. Look, I said quietly. We are getting closer to something. I do not know what yet, but something. The watch ticked faintly. Once, twice. That was all the answer I needed. I want to pause here for just a moment. If this story is finding you tonight, if these words are keeping you company in the dark, please consider subscribing to this channel and leaving a like on the video. It helps more than you know, so that I can keep telling these stories. For travelers like you, travelers in the dark, listening to a voice from far away, thank you. Now, let us continue the journey. I climbed for many days. The road became a path. The path became a trail. The trail sometimes disappeared entirely, and I had to find it again by reading the shape of the land. The forest closed around me. Pine trees, tall, old, their needles thick under my feet. The air smelled of resin and damp earth and something colder underneath. Something that came from far above. In the forest I was not afraid. I had learned long ago that forests are not enemies. Forests are old houses with many rooms, and if you walk respectfully through their rooms, they let you pass. I walked respectfully. I did not break branches. I did not shout. I did not leave anything behind that did not belong, and the forest let me pass. On the second day in the forest, I came to a clearing. A small wooden house stood in the middle of it. A shepherd's hut, maybe, or a hermit's. The roof was made of stacked wooden shingles, weighed down with stones. The door was open. I went inside, one room. A small fireplace built of river stones, a wooden cot in the corner, a shelf with 3 clay bowls and a wooden spoon, and on the wall a single photograph, old, black and white, fading, a man and a woman. Standing in front of this same hut, maybe 30 years old, both smiling. The woman was holding a baby. I looked at the photograph for a long time. I wondered what had happened to them, where they had gone, where the baby had grown up, whether the baby had been an old person by the time the world emptied, or whether the baby had still been a child. I would never know. But I took the photograph down from the wall, very carefully. I held it in my hands. And I said to the three of them, "I see you." Then I put the photograph back exactly where it had been, on the same nail, facing the same direction. Some things must stay where they are. I slept in the hut that night, on the wooden cot, with my own blanket, because the blanket on the cot was too thin and too old to disturb. In the morning, I lit a small fire in the fireplace. Not to warm myself, the morning was already warm, but because I wanted the hut to feel visited, to remember what it was like to have smoke rising from its chimney. I let the fire burn for an hour. Then I put it out carefully. I swept the ashes into a small pile, and I left the forest thinned as I climbed higher. By the afternoon of the next day, I came out of the trees entirely. I was on a ridge. Above me, only sky. Below me, the forest I had just left, spreading like a green ocean down toward the plains. And ahead of me, the mountains. The real mountains. The Himalayas. I had thought I was prepared. I was not prepared. Because the Himalayas, when you finally see them up close, do not look like mountains. They look like something else. Something that the word mountain cannot hold. They look like the edge of the world, like a wall built by gods to separate one kind of existence from another. White peaks rising one behind the other, into distances I could not measure, each one taller than I had ever imagined a thing could be. I sat down on the ridge, because my legs would not hold me anymore, and I just looked for an hour, maybe two. I did not write in my notebook. I did not take the watch from my pocket. I did not speak. I only looked, and I felt that, for the first time in this journey, I was being looked at in return. The mountains were watching me, not with hostility, not with welcome, just watching. The way something very old watches something very small, without judgment, without expectation, just attention. And being watched by mountains is a kind of blessing, a kind of being known. When I finally stood up, the light was changing. The peaks were turning gold, then pink, then a soft, deep purple as the sun fell behind them. I needed to find shelter for the night. I walked back into the trees a little way. I found a place where two great pines had grown close together, their roots forming a kind of natural hollow. I unrolled my blanket. I ate a little of the rice I had cooked the night before. I drank water from the small stream nearby, and then I lay on my back, and I watched the sky darken between the branches. The first star appeared, then another, and one of those stars was very bright. So bright I almost spoke to it. "Hello," I said quietly. The star did not answer, of course, but it was there, and so was I, and in this empty world, that was a meeting. I walked north for many more days through the foothills. I passed small villages built on terraces cut into the hillsides, houses of stone and wood, with prayer flags strung from their roofs. The prayer flags were faded, white, yellow, red, green, blue, the colors of elements and elements and elements. The wind moved through them gently. Each flag had once held a printed prayer. The wind had carried those prayers for years, up into the air, across the valleys, to wherever prayers go. The flags were now mostly torn, mostly transparent, but they still moved in the wind, and the wind still carried. The prayer was no longer in the cloth. The prayer had become the wind itself. In one village, on a wooden post by the path, I found a small wooden box with a glass front. Inside the box, a prayer wheel, silver, old, with Tibetan letters carved around its surface. I had seen prayer wheels in pictures in some other life. I knew that you were supposed to spin them. Each spin sent the prayer inside out into the world. I reached out, I spun the wheel, it moved easily, smoothly. Someone had cared for it well before they had gone. I spun it 3 times. Then I let it slow down on its own. It made a soft, rhythmic sound as it turned. Tick, 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 like the watch in my pocket. The two sounds were not the same, but they were cousins. The path led me along the side of a great valley. Far below, a river was running, wild and white, the water of melted snow rushing down toward the plains I had left behind. I followed the path higher. The air grew thinner. My breath grew shorter, but I felt no fear. Only a kind of calm tiredness, the kind that says, "You are doing the right thing. Keep going." One evening, I came to a small wooden bridge across a side stream, old, half broken, but still crossable. On the far side of the bridge, on a flat stone, someone had placed a small offering: 3 almonds, a piece of dried apricot, a coin. The almonds had been there a long time. The apricot was hard as a stone itself. The coin was green with corrosion, but someone had placed them as a gift to the bridge, to the stream, to whatever god or spirit they believed protected travelers in this place. I knelt by the offering. I added something of my own, a single grain of rice from the small bag in my pocket. It was the smallest offering I could think of, but it was real, and it was given freely. The next traveler, if there was a next traveler, would find 4 offerings instead of 3. I slept that night beside the bridge, under a sky so full of stars that I could not find a single empty patch of black between them. The mountains made the sky larger, or the sky made the mountains smaller. I could not tell which. Both, maybe, in the morning. I crossed the bridge. The old wood creaked beneath my feet. But it held. And on the other side, a sign, a wooden sign, leaning at an angle, half buried in the grass. The paint was almost gone, but I could still make out a few letters, a border sign. I had reached the edge of India. I was about to enter Pakistan. I stood by the sign for a moment. I touched it with my hand. In another world, in another time, this would have been a place of soldiers, of fences, of papers, of waiting. Now it was a piece of wood with old paint, leaning in the grass, beside a bridge that almost no one would ever cross again. The world had returned to its old self, the world before borders, the world that did not know which side of a line a person belonged to. In a strange way, this felt like a healing, even if there was no one left to be healed. I took the watch from my pocket one more time before crossing. "India is behind us now," I said to the watch. "Pakistan is in front of us. The mountains are getting bigger. The road is getting harder. But we are going. We are still going." The watch ticked faintly. I closed it, I put it back, and I walked across the border. There was no one to stop me, no one to welcome me. Only the wind and the mountains and the silent path leading higher. The first hours in Pakistan felt the same as the last hours in India, because mountains do not know about borders. The same stones, the same air, the same silence. But by the second day, something changed. The valleys grew deeper, the cliffs grew sharper, the river running below me grew louder, wilder, as if it were angrier in this country than in the last. I had crossed into the Karakoram, the wild edge of the Himalayas, the place where the earth's crust had been folded and broken and lifted into stones too tall to be believed. The road I followed was old, cut into the side of cliffs. In some places it had collapsed into the river far below, and I had to climb across the bare rock face, holding to whatever I could find. Once my foot slipped. I caught myself on a small bush growing out of a crack. I sat there for a moment, holding the bush. My heart was beating fast, and I said to the bush out loud, "Thank you." The bush rustled in the wind, a small acknowledgement. Then I climbed on. Pakistan, in the mountains, was empty in a different way than India had been. India had felt empty, like a house where the family had just left. You could still smell their cooking. You could still hear in your imagination their voices. Pakistan, up here, felt empty like a mountain itself, a natural emptiness, as if humans had only ever been visitors to this place, even when there were millions of them, and now the visitors had gone home, and the mountains were back to being themselves. On the third day in the mountains, I came to a village, stone houses with flat roofs, stacked carefully along a slope above the river, wooden doors carved with old patterns, a small mosque at the edge of the village, its minaret short, simple, honest, made of the same stones as the houses, so that the mosque looked like part of the mountain. The whole village was empty, but on the door of one house, someone had tied a small piece of red cloth, faded, worn by years of wind, a blessing, a protection, left behind by someone who had hoped that what they loved would be safe. I touched the cloth, very gently. I did not untie it. Some things must stay where they are. I walked through the village slowly, looking into each house, but not entering most of them. The doors were closed in this village. Out of respect, I did not open the closed ones. But the door of the mosque was open. I took off my shoes at the threshold. I went inside. The floor was covered in old carpets, red, green, brown, dust deep in their patterns. I walked across the carpets. The wool was soft under my feet. Years of feet had worn it smooth. The mihrab, the prayer niche carved into the front wall, pointed west, toward Mecca, toward a place I had never been. But standing there I felt I had been welcomed, not by a god, by the building itself. A building that has been built for prayer does not stop praying, even when the people are gone. I sat on the carpet in the middle of the small mosque. I took the tesbih from my pocket, the wooden prayer beads I had been carrying since Cappadocia, since long before this new journey had begun. I passed the beads through my fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4. I did not pray with words. I did not know any prayers in the language this mosque had once known. But the rhythm of the beads was a prayer of presence, prayer of, I am here, and the mosque listened. I do not know how long I sat there. The light from the small window moved slowly across the floor, from one carpet to another, the way light moves when no one is hurrying anywhere. When I finally stood up, my legs were stiff, but my heart was very calm. I put the tesbih back in my pocket. I bowed my head once toward the mihrab, and I left. I slept that night in the courtyard of one of the village houses. Not inside. The night was cold but clear, and I wanted to see the stars. The stars in the Karakoram are not like the stars anywhere else. In the desert, the stars had been crowded, so many of them that the sky had no black between them. In the mountains, the stars were fewer, but each one was sharper, brighter, more alone. As if each star had its own piece of sky, and it had been waiting all night for me to look at it. I picked one star, the brightest one in the sky above the mosque, and I made it mine for the night. This is my star, I said, just for tonight. I'm not naming you. I am just choosing you. The star said nothing, but it shone steadily, without flickering. Mountain stars do not flicker as much as plains stars. The air is too thin and too clean. I fell asleep with the star above me. When I woke at dawn, the star was gone. The sun was coming over the eastern peaks. The world was silver and pink. But I knew the star was still there, behind the day, waiting for the next night, waiting for whoever would look up next. I left the village in the morning. I followed the road higher into the mountains. The road climbed in long switchbacks, each turn higher than the last. Each turn showing me a wider view of the valley below. A river at the bottom, white with snowmelt, forests of pine on the lower slopes, bare stone above the trees, snow above the stone, sky above the snow, a whole geography stacked into one view. By the afternoon, the road came to a high pass. A pile of stones marked the top. Pilgrims had built it, over the years, by adding one stone each time they reached this place, a cairn. Like the Icelandic Vörður I had seen long ago, I added a stone from the road beside me. The pile grew by one. Maybe no one would ever add another. Or maybe someone would, in a year, in 10 years, in 100 years. It did not matter. The stone I had added was real. It would stay there until the wind and the rain wore it back into the mountain. I sat at the pass for a while, eating a little of my dried food, looking back the way I had come, looking ahead at what was still to come. To my south, far below, India, the plains, the forest, the foothills, all hidden now beneath layers of distance. To my north, more mountains, and somewhere among them, a valley I did not yet know about, but a valley that somehow I could feel, the way you can feel a person in a room even when your eyes are closed. I took the watch from my pocket. I opened the cover. I will come back to you. M. The ticking was very faint now, slower than it had been in India, slower than it had been a week ago. I was not sure why, but it was still ticking. That was enough. I closed the watch. I stood up. I shouldered my bag, and I began to walk down the other side of the pass, into a valley I did not know, into a part of the world I had never imagined, into the next quiet conversation between me and the silent earth. I came down from the pass slowly. The path was steep, my knees were tired from the climb, but going down was its own kind of effort. A different kind, the kind that asks your body to break, again and again, with every step. The light changed as I descended. The high white clarity of the pass softened, became golden, became warm. And as I came around a final bend in the trail, I saw the valley. I stopped where I stood. Hunza. I knew the name without remembering how I knew it. Some places announced themselves. The way the Ganges had announced itself in Varanasi. The valley opened below me like a green secret hidden between white walls. A river ran along its floor. Glacier water, pale and milk blue, along the river, stretching for miles, terraces. Old stone terraces cut into the slopes by hands that had been working this land for 1,000 years. On the terraces, apricot trees, walnut trees, small fields where wheat had once grown, and above everything, mountains. Mountains that did not look like mountains, mountains that looked like cathedrals, like the architecture of a god who built only with stone and snow. I sat on a rock at the side of the trail. I needed to look. Just look. Some places are not meant to be walked into right away. Some places must be looked at first, from a distance, the way you look at a sleeping person you love, without disturbing them. I looked at Hunza for almost an hour. When I finally walked down into the valley, the air was different, warmer than the pass, softer, full of small smells. Apricot leaves, stone warmed by the sun, water from somewhere I could not yet see. I followed a small trail down through the terraces. The apricot trees were everywhere, wild now, some of them bent under the weight of fruit that no one had picked. Small orange apricots, hundreds of them, thousands. I reached up, picked one, held it in my hand. It was warm from the sun, soft, almost ready to fall on its own. I bit into it. I cannot describe what that apricot tasted like. It was not like any fruit I had ever eaten in any other country on this long journey. It was sweeter than the jam in Bulgaria, brighter than the pomegranate on the steppe. It tasted like sunlight that had been waiting for years to be tasted. I ate it slowly, down to the seed. I held the seed in my palm for a moment, and then I dropped it onto the soil at the base of the tree. Maybe one day, in some far century, that seed would become another tree. Maybe not, but I had given it the chance. I walked deeper into the valley. Eventually, I came to a village. The houses were built of stone and wood, flat roofs, wooden balconies, carved doors. Many of the doors had small painted designs around them. Geometric patterns, old patterns, from a time before any of us. I walked along the main path of the village. The path was narrow, worn smooth by generations of feet. I stopped in front of one house. The door was painted blue, a faded, beautiful blue, the same blue I had seen on the walls of the room where I had first opened my eyes in Varanasi. I smiled. The world has its own way of repeating itself, quietly. Without making a fuss, I pushed the door. It opened with a small wooden creak inside, a single large room. A wooden floor. A low table in the center. Cushions around the table. A small fireplace built into one wall. Pots and pans hanging from wooden pegs, and on the table, a wooden bowl. Inside the bowl, dried apricots, old but still good. Beside the bowl, a small clay jar. I opened it. Inside, honey, crystallized, pale gold. Someone had left these things on the table, as if they were going to come back to them in just a moment, as if they had only stepped outside. I sat at the table. On one of the cushions, I took an apricot from the bowl. I dipped it in the honey. I ate it slowly. And again, the taste of the valley filled my mouth. Sweetness on top of sweetness. The sweetness of the fruit. The The sweetness of bees that had once flown across these terraces, bees that were probably still flying somewhere, doing their own work without us. In one corner of the room there was a small wooden chest. I went over and opened it. Inside, clothes, folded carefully, a long shirt of pale cotton, a wool vest, dark red, embroidered around the collar with small white flowers, a round wool cap. The cap caught my eye. It was the kind of cap men in this valley had worn. I had seen it in some picture, in some other life. I took it out. I held it in my hands. It was light. The wool was soft. Years of folding in the dark of the chest had not damaged it. I put it on my head. It fit. I do not know why this surprised me, but it did. It fit, as if it had been made for me. I walked to a small mirror that hung on the wall above the fireplace. I looked at myself, a man with a long beard, tired eyes, a wool cap from a valley he had never seen until today, a face that looked, finally, a little bit at home. I left the cap on my head. I do not know if the man who had owned it would have minded. I do not think he would have. I think he would have nodded. The way men nod to each other in mountain villages, a small nod that says, "Welcome. Stay as long as you need." I stayed in the valley for many days, more days than I had stayed anywhere else on this entire journey. Because the valley did not feel like a place I needed to leave quickly. The valley felt like a place that wanted me to rest. I slept in different houses on different nights, always with the door closed gently behind me when I left. I ate apricots from the trees. I drank water from the small streams that came down from the glaciers above. I bathed in a clear pool I found one afternoon behind a curtain of willow branches. The water was so cold it took my breath away, but after the cold, my body felt new. In one of the houses, I found a small wooden box on a high shelf. I took it down. I opened it. Inside, letters, old letters, written in a script I could not read. But the handwriting was beautiful, careful. The kind of handwriting a person uses when they care very much about who is going to read what they have written. I held the letters. I did not try to read them. I only held them. And I wondered who had written them, to whom, about what. A mother to a son who had gone to the city for work. A husband to a wife while he was away on a long journey. A friend to a friend, telling them about an apricot harvest that had been especially good this year. I would never know, but I held the letters for a long time. And I felt that somehow, just by holding them, I was honoring whatever love had once moved through them. I put the letters back in the box. I put the box back on the shelf. One evening, as the sun was beginning to set behind the western peaks, I climbed up to a flat rock above the village. I sat on the rock, and I watched the light change on the mountains. The peaks turned pink, then orange, then a deep, deep red, as if the snow itself were burning. Then they faded to blue, then to gray, then to silver under the first stars. This was a thing the people of this valley had watched every evening for 1,000 years. It had been free. The most beautiful thing in the world, and it had been free. I stayed on the rock long after dark. The stars came out, one by one. The river below me whispered in the darkness. Somewhere in the village, an old wooden door creaked in the wind. I took the watch from my pocket. I opened it. "I will come back to you, Im." I held the watch out toward the mountains, the same way I had held it out in the foothills. "Look," I said. "Look at this." The watch ticked, faintly, once, twice, and then I closed the cover and I walked back down to the village to sleep. I left Hunza on a morning when the air was so clear it almost hurt to breathe. I packed a small handful of dried apricots into my bag. I did not take much, only enough so that on the road ahead, when I felt tired or alone, I could put one in my mouth and remember. I closed the door of the house behind me for the last time. I walked through the village one more time. I touched the door of the small mosque on my way out. A goodbye, and I followed the road west. The road out of Hunza was long. It followed the river for a while. Then it climbed away from the river, up into rocky hills where almost nothing grew. I walked for many days through these dry mountains. The valley behind me became a memory I could almost taste. Sometimes, when I stopped to rest, I would put a dried apricot in my mouth, and the sweetness would bring back everything. The blue door, the wool cap, the letters in the wooden box, the mountains turning red at sunset, the cold water of the pool behind the willow branches, a whole valley inside one piece of dried fruit. That is the magic that food carries, and I had learned, on this journey, to honor that magic. The road brought me down slowly out of the high mountains. The land changed, the peaks behind me grew smaller, the hills around me grew browner, the air grew warmer, drier, more dusty. I was leaving the realm of snow. I was entering the realm of dust. After many days, I reached a city. It rose out of the dry hills like an old story. Brown walls, round towers, domes I could see from far away, dark against the pale sky. I knew somehow that this was Peshawar, the old city at the edge of the mountains. The city that had been a gateway for thousands of years. Through its bazaars had passed silk from China, spices from India, horses from Central Asia, words and prayers and rumors from every corner of the world, and now it was empty. I walked into the city through one of its old gates. The wooden doors of the gate were still standing, but they had not been closed in a long time. I passed beneath them. Inside the walls, narrow streets, tall houses leaning toward each other. Wooden balconies that had been beautiful once and were still beautiful now, though softened by years. I walked deeper into the old city. I came to the bazaar, a long covered street, vaulted roofs of brick and wood, light coming down through small openings high above, dust dancing in the beams of light on either side stalls, hundreds of stalls, each one with its shutters closed or half open, each one a small dead shop. I walked slowly down the bazaar street. The sound of my footsteps was the only sound, but it was not a lonely sound. It was a respectful sound, like footsteps in a great cathedral. In one stall I saw rolls of cloth, silk, cotton, wool, stacked on shelves. Colors had faded a little, but they were still beautiful. Deep reds, ocean blues, forest greens, gold thread woven through some of them, glinting faintly even in the dim light. I touched one of the rolls. The silk was cool under my fingers, smooth, the way silk has been smooth for thousands of years in this city, in this very street. I did not take any of the cloth. It was not mine to take, but I touched it so that the cloth would know it had not been forgotten. In another stall, spices. This was the most surprising thing in the whole bazaar, because the spices still had their colors. Mounds of yellow turmeric, red chili, brown cumin, green dried mint, orange saffron. The mounds had crusted over on top, but underneath, the powders were still bright. I leaned close to one of the mounds. I breathed in. The smell. The smell brought tears to my eyes for no reason I could explain. The smell of a market that had once been alive with shouting and laughing and arguing over prices. The smell of food being cooked in 1,000 kitchens. The smell of a whole civilization that had loved its food, that had taken care to make even ordinary meals beautiful with these powders and seeds. I closed my eyes and breathed it in for a long time. A whole world, inside one breath. I walked further along the bazaar. I came to a small open square inside the covered streets. In the middle of the square, an old fountain. Dry now, the stone was carved with patterns of flowers and stars. I sat on the edge of the fountain. Around me, the stalls of jewelers. I could see in the dim windows, small things still on display. Silver bracelets, old coins, glass beads in little wooden trays. No one had taken any of it. In the old world, the world of fear, this would have been impossible. Anything of value would have been carried away by hands that needed it or wanted it. But here now, in this new world, value had become a different word. A bracelet was just a bracelet. A coin was just a coin. They had no power left to make anyone reach for them. The only thing that still had value was being there, being a witness, looking, touching gently, saying, "In your heart, I see you. You were beautiful. You were loved by hands I will never know." I sat by the fountain for a long time. The light from the high openings moved across the stones, from one part of the square to another. Slowly, without any hurry at all, I took my notebook from my bag. The same notebook? No, a new one. I had filled the old one long ago, in another country, on another shore. But this new one was beginning to fill too, I wrote. In Peshawar today, the bazaar still has its colors, the spices still smell of the kitchens of 1,000 families. I think the cities that love themselves the most are the cities that empty the most beautifully. There is a kind of dignity in how an old bazaar lets itself become silent. It does not collapse, it does not rot, it just waits. And the waiting itself becomes a kind of song. I closed the notebook, I put it back in my bag. I stood up from the fountain, I walked the rest of the way through the bazaar. At the far end, I came out into the open city again. The sun was bright after the dimness of the covered streets. I shielded my eyes for a moment, and I saw in front of me the old city walls of Peshawar, and beyond the walls, the road leading west. I knew where the road was going. It was going to the Khyber Pass. It was going to Afghanistan. That night, I slept in a small house just inside the city walls, a simple house, a wooden bed, a folded blanket, walls of mud and stone. Before I slept, I sat for a while on the edge of the bed. I took the wool cap from Hunza out of my bag. I had been carrying it folded inside all the way from the valley. I looked at the cap, and I thought about how strange it was that a piece of wool from a valley I had never imagined, made by hands I would never know, had become a part of who I was now. We are made of small things, borrowed things, gifts from strangers across time. I put the cap on the bed beside me, like a small companion, and I slept. In the morning I gathered my things, I shouldered my bag, I put the wool cap on my head. I walked out of the house. I walked through the streets of Peshawar one more time, going west. I passed under the old city wall. I came out onto the dusty road that led toward the mountains again. The Khyber, the famous pass. The doorway between worlds. I had heard the name many times in stories that came from somewhere I could not remember, and now I was walking toward it. I did not feel afraid. I felt only the same quiet, steady pull that had been guiding me for so long, the pull of west, the pull of return, the pull of a journey that knew, somehow, where it was going, even when I did not. The road to the Khyber Pass climbed gently at first. Brown hills on both sides, dry grass, stones the color of old bread. The wind carried small pieces of dust that stung my face when it gusted, then went silent again, then gusted again. I walked alone, but I did not feel alone, because the road I was walking had been walked by so many feet for so many centuries that the road itself was a kind of company. Alexander's soldiers had walked this road. Persian merchants had walked it with bags of silver tied to their belts. Buddhist monks had walked it with scrolls under their arms, carrying their teachings from India toward the rest of Asia. British officers had ridden it on horseback in another century, in another life. Pilgrims, refugees, traders, poets, kings, they had all passed through this narrow gap in the mountains, and now I was passing through, the last one, perhaps, or the second to last, or the middle of something I could not yet see the shape of. The pass narrowed. The hills became cliffs. Stone walls rose on either side of the road, brown and red, full of small caves and old fortifications I could see high up. Watchtowers, old guard posts, built into the rock by people who had needed to defend this place from other people who had wanted to take it. Now there was no one to defend, and no one to take. The watchtowers watched only the wind. I stopped at the highest point of the pass. There was an old stone marker by the side of the road. The writing on it had been worn away by years of dust storms. Only the shape of the marker remained. I touched it, and I said quietly, "I'm crossing now." I do not know who I was telling. The marker, the mountains, the wind, myself, maybe all of them. I came down the other side slowly. The descent was different from the climb. The light changed, the colors of the stones changed, even the silence changed. The silence of Pakistan had been a silence with mountains in it. The silence of Afghanistan was something else, a silence with distance in it, a silence that stretched, that did not end. When I reached the floor of the valley below the pass, I sat on a rock and rested. I took a small piece of dried apricot from my bag, the last sweetness of Hunza, traveling with me into a new country. I ate it slowly, and I looked around at this new place I had entered. Afghanistan, in its first hours, did not look the way I had expected. I had expected ruin. I had expected the marks of war, the broken things, the angry things. But what I saw was a kind of strange beauty. Brown hills, soft as a sleeping animal. A few wild trees clinging to the slopes. A dry riverbed where, in spring, water must have run. The shadow of a hawk passing across the road. The land was not broken. The land was old. There is a difference. Old land has lived through everything. Empires, wars, plagues. The land does not remember any of it the way humans remember. The land just continues, with patience, with a kind of quiet that you cannot quite name. I walked west. The road here was less of a road and more of a long suggestion. In some places it disappeared entirely. I walked across open country between the hills, finding my way by the shape of the land. In one place, I came across an old vehicle. A truck painted in colors that had once been bright. Red, green, yellow, with patterns and designs along the sides, and small mirrors hanging from the front. The famous painted trucks of this country. I had seen pictures of them in some other life. The truck had not moved in many years. The tires had collapsed. Plants were growing through the floor of the cab. But the paintings were still beautiful. A peacock on one side, a mountain landscape on the other, a line of poetry in flowing script across the back. I could not read the script, but the curves of the letters were beautiful, like a song frozen on metal. I stood by the truck for a long time. I touched the paintings gently with my fingertips. Whoever had painted these had loved their work. You could feel it. Love comes through the things people make, even years later, even when the maker is gone. That night I camped in a dry riverbed. The night was cold, colder than I had expected. I wrapped myself in my blanket and lay on my back and watched the sky. The stars in Afghanistan were different from the stars in Pakistan. I do not know how to explain this. They were the same stars, of course, the same constellations. But here, they felt closer, more attentive, as if they were leaning down to look at this empty country and at the small figure walking through it. I picked one star, again as I had done in Hunza. I made it mine for the night. "Hello, friend," I said. "It is just you and me down here." The star said nothing, but it was steady, and steady is enough. I walked for many days west and north. The land kept changing. Sometimes hills, sometimes flat brown plains. Once, a green valley with a small stream running through it. I drank from the stream. The water was sweet. I passed empty villages, mud brick houses with their walls slowly returning to the earth they had been built from. Round wells with old wooden buckets still in place. Doorways framed by carved wood that had grayed with age. In one of these villages, in the courtyard of a house, I found a child's toy, a small wooden horse, painted blue, the paint mostly worn off. It was lying on its side in the dust, as if a child had been playing with it one moment, and the next moment had been called away, and the toy had been left behind, and the calling had never ended. I picked up the wooden horse. I dusted it off gently. I set it upright on a flat stone in the middle of the courtyard, standing instead of lying down, ready to be played with again if the child ever came back. It was the smallest thing, but I felt I had to do it. Later in the day I came to a garden. This is the part I want to tell carefully, because the garden in that village changed me. It was an old garden surrounded by mud walls that had partly collapsed. From outside, it looked like nothing, just another ruin. But when I climbed over the fallen part of the wall and stepped inside, it was a garden, pomegranate trees, apricot trees, a few wild roses climbing over a broken fountain in the center, long grass, small purple wildflowers, the whole space humming with the kind of life that only happens when humans stop interfering. I stood in the middle of the garden and looked around. The walls held the world out. The garden held its own quiet. The sun came down through the leaves in spots and patches. I sat on the broken edge of the fountain. A pomegranate tree was right beside me. The fruit on it was small, unripe, hard but real. I picked one. I held it in my hand, and I remembered another pomegranate, from another country, from another life. The one I had given to a horse on the steppe, what felt like 100 years ago. Fruits travel through stories. They link things that should not be linked. The horse on the steppe, the tree in this Afghan garden, the orchard in old Iran where the first pomegranate had fallen beside me as I slept, all of them, somehow, were one story now. The story of a man who had been carrying small, unripe pomegranates from one end of the world to the other. On the inside of the garden wall, I noticed something, writing, in Persian script, beautiful curves, faded ink but still there. I could not read it, but I traced the letters with my finger, slowly, like reading a face I had never seen but somehow knew. A poem, maybe, a name, a prayer, a line by Rumi or Hafez or someone older, or someone smaller, just a person who had wanted to leave their words on a wall in a garden where they would live a little longer than they themselves would. It did not matter what it said. What mattered was that someone had written it, and someone now was reading it with fingers instead of with eyes. That was a kind of reading too. I stayed in the garden for a long time, until the sun began to fall toward the west and the shadows grew long across the grass, until the wild roses turned a deeper red in the late light. Then I climbed back over the broken wall. I shouldered my bag. I walked on, but a small piece of that garden came with me, the kind of piece you do not put in your bag, the kind that goes inside. I came to Kabul on the 11th day after the Khyber Pass. I knew it was Kabul before I saw any sign. I knew because the road widened, because the broken vehicles by the side of the road became more frequent, because in the distance, between two ridges, I saw the first low buildings of a city spreading across a wide, dry plain, with mountains rising behind it. Kabul, a name I had heard since I was a child, or since whatever was left of being a child inside me had heard it, a name that had always carried weight. Weight from old wars, weight from old poems, weight from stories travelers brought back to other places. And now I was walking toward it on foot. The outskirts of Kabul came slowly. First, broken walls, old compounds with their gates hanging open, then a few rusted vehicles in a row, then small houses, then larger buildings. I walked into the city without ceremony. There was no one to stop me, no one to ask me where I had come from or where I was going. The streets of Kabul were quiet in a way that made me listen harder than I had listened in any other city on this journey, as if the silence here was not absence, as if the silence was waiting for something, or remembering something, or both. I walked through neighborhoods I did not know the names of, past houses with their doors open, past a small mosque with its minaret tilted slightly to one side, the way the church bell tower in that Bulgarian village had been tilted in the very first days of my walking, long ago. Some buildings here were broken in ways that came from war. You could tell the walls had certain kinds of marks, certain holes. The stones had been kicked apart by something more violent than rain or time. But other buildings were perfectly intact, as if the war had passed by them, somehow by accident or by mercy. A whole city of accidents and mercies. In one street, I saw a bicycle leaning against a wall, old, the tires flat, the frame painted blue, a small basket fixed to the front. I imagined the person who had ridden it, a young man, maybe, going to work in the morning. The basket carrying a piece of bread, a folded newspaper. The bicycle had been waiting for him for a long time. I touched the handlebars. They were warm from the sun. Then I walked on. I came to a small square in what must have once been the center of an old neighborhood. In the middle of the square, a tea house. The wooden door was open. The painted sign above the door had faded, but I could still see the shape of a teapot on it, the universal sign of a place where strangers used to sit together over hot water and small cups. I went inside. The tea house was small, a long room with low cushions along the walls, low wooden tables in front of the cushions, a counter at the back with a large samovar standing on it. I walked over to the samovar and touched it, cold, of course, but still standing, still waiting on the counter beside it, a row of small glass cups upside down on a wooden tray. I picked one up, held it in my hand. How many men had drunk from this cup, I wondered. How many evenings, after long days of work, sitting on these cushions, talking about politics, about their families, about the old wars, about who had said what in the bazaar that day. I put the glass down, carefully, right side up. If anyone else ever came here, the glass would be ready. I sat down on one of the cushions, my back against the wall. For a long time I just sat. The way men in this tea house must have sat, on quiet afternoons when there was nothing urgent to talk about and the heat outside was too much to want to go anywhere. I imagined I could hear voices. Old men, arguing softly about something, laughing at a joke, reciting a line of poetry. There would always have been someone reciting a line of poetry in a tea house in Kabul. That is what I had always heard about this country, that poetry was in the air. I left the tea house after a while. I kept walking through the city, and eventually in the heart of the old quarter, I found what I had been hoping I would find. A bookshop. The door was open. The shelves were full. Books in Persian, in Pashto, in Arabic, in Urdu, a few in English, a few in French, a few in languages I could not even guess at. The shop smelled of paper and dust and something else. The smell of stories that had been waiting on shelves for years to be opened by someone. I walked along the shelves slowly. I took down a book of poems, the English ones first because those were the ones I could read. The cover said, Rumi. I had heard the name before, somewhere, from some other life. I opened the book. A line on the page I had opened to, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. I read the line 3 times and I felt that someone across centuries was meeting me in a field, out beyond everything. I sat down on the wooden floor of the bookshop. I read more lines, slowly, one at a time, letting each one take its full time inside me. You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? The wound is the place where the light enters you. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. I read for an hour, maybe 2, and by the end I was crying. Quietly. The way you cry when something has been said to you that you needed to hear without knowing you needed it. I took the book with me when I left. I think Rumi would have wanted that. Some books are meant to travel. Some books are meant to keep walking, even after the world has stopped. I put the book in my bag, next to the small wool cap from Hunza. 2 gifts from 2 different mountains, traveling together now, inside the bag of a man who did not even know his own name. I walked through more of Kabul that afternoon. I came to a place where, on a high hill above the city, there was a small white shrine. I climbed the path to it. Slowly, because the air was thin and my legs were tired. When I reached the top, I sat down beside the shrine and looked out over the whole city. Kabul lay below me in the late light, brown rooftops, white walls, the thin lines of streets, the dark patches of old gardens hidden between houses, the ring of mountains around it all, holding the city, the way 2 hands hold a bowl. I sat there until the light faded, until the city below me began to disappear into the blue evening. And as I watched the city disappear, I thought of all the people who had once watched the same view, mothers waiting for their sons to come home, old men with teacups in their hands, children sneaking up here in secret, away from the eyes of grown-ups, lovers, holding hands quietly, watching the lights of their city come on. They were gone, but the view remained. And the view itself was a kind of remembering. Mountains remembered them. The shape of the streets remembered them. The shrine beside me, with its faded white walls, remembered them. I too would remember them, as best I could. With my one stranger's eyes and my one stranger's heart. That was the only gift I could give Kabul. That night I slept in the courtyard of a small mosque near the bottom of the hill. The stars above me were soft, the air was cold but kind. The wool cap from Hunza was on my head. The book of Rumi was tucked under my blanket, beside my chest like a small warm animal. I closed my eyes, and I thought about the line in the book. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. I had been walking toward that field, I realized, for my entire journey. For longer than my entire journey. For as long as I had been alive. Whoever I was, whoever I had been before, and maybe the field was not a place. Maybe the field was a way of standing still, a way of being, a way of saying yes to the world without trying to fix it. Maybe I was already in the field. Maybe I had been in the field for a long time, without knowing. I slept deeply that night, the deepest sleep since Hunza, and in my dreams I walked through a field of long green grass, and the wind moved through the grass, and somewhere ahead of me, on the other side of the field, a figure was waiting. I could not see the figure clearly, but I knew it was waiting for me, and I was walking toward it, and I was not afraid. I left Kabul on a morning when the sky was the color of soft milk. The road west out of the city climbed through brown hills and then dropped into long, open plains, the kind of land where you could see for many kilometers in every direction, where the horizon was a circle and you were standing in the middle of it. I walked for many days through this open country. The wind was constant, not a violent wind, a patient wind, the kind of wind that has been blowing across these plains for so long that it has become part of the silence rather than a break in it. I passed villages that were almost the same as the villages I had passed before. Mud brick houses, round wells, wooden doors carved in old patterns. In one village, a single donkey was standing in the middle of the main street, alive, calm, looking at me without any surprise at all. I stopped about 10 meters from the donkey. We looked at each other. Then I bowed my head a little, the way I had bowed to Ganesha long ago in Varanasi, not because I believed the donkey was a god, but because the donkey was alive and I was alive, and the meeting deserved a gesture. The donkey blinked slowly and then walked away down the street, as if it had places to go. I watched until it disappeared around a corner. A donkey alone in an Afghan village, after the end of the world, walking somewhere on its own business. I do not know why this made me feel so calm, but it did. After many more days of walking, I came into a wider valley. The walls of the valley were high cliffs of red stone. Caves dotted the cliffs, hundreds of caves, old cells where monks had lived 1,000 years ago, when this valley had been a stop on the Silk Road and a center of Buddhist learning. Bamiyan. I knew the name without remembering how I had learned it. I walked along the floor of the valley, looking up at the cliffs. And then I came to the niches, two enormous empty hollows in the rock face, shaped roughly like standing human figures, but with the figures themselves gone, just the outline of where they had once stood, carved into the stone of the cliff, taller than any building I had ever seen. The Buddhas. I had heard of them somewhere, the great stone Buddhas of Bamiyan, carved into these cliffs by monks 1,500 years ago, destroyed long before the world ended by men who believed the Buddhas were wrong to exist. The Buddhas had been gone for many lifetimes already, but the niches remained, the shape of where they had been, the negative of their bodies held forever in the rock. I stood in front of the larger niche. I looked up at the empty space where the Buddha had stood, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. I felt that the Buddha was still there, not the stone Buddha. The stone was gone, but the shape of him, the memory of him, the hollow in the rock that still held the form of a teacher who had stood here for 15 centuries, smiling down at the valley with his stone smile, watching travelers and merchants and monks and children. The hollow was a kind of presence. You can be present, I understood, even after you are gone, if the place you stood in remembers you. If the air around where you used to be still keeps your shape. I sat on the dry ground at the base of the cliff. I looked up at the empty niche for a long time, and I thought about all the things I had seen on this journey, and on my journey before this one, that were like the Buddhas of Bamiyan. A church in Serbia where the prayers had gone but the smell of them remained. A barber shop in Tuscany where the barber had gone but the apron still hung on the chair. A tea house in Kabul where the men had gone but the cups were still ready on the counter. Empty niches, all of them, holding the shape of what had been. The whole world now was an empty niche, and the world itself remembered everything that had once stood inside it. I climbed up to one of the small caves in the cliff wall. The cave I chose had a low entrance and a domed ceiling inside. There were faded paintings on the curved walls, figures in robes, faces that had almost been worn away, lotus flowers, a circle of blue around the dome. A monk had lived here once, maybe 1,000 years ago. He had painted these walls himself, perhaps, or had simply looked at them every day until he could see them with his eyes closed. I sat in the middle of the cave, cross-legged, the way I had seen monks sit in old pictures, and I closed my eyes. I did not try to meditate. I did not know how to meditate. I only sat and listened to the silence inside the cave, which was different from the silence outside. The silence inside was older, smaller, held by curved walls. I do not know how long I sat there, but when I opened my eyes again, the light coming through the cave entrance had changed color. It had been white when I went in, now it was gold. I had been sitting for hours, and I had not felt them pass. That night I slept in the cave. I did not light a fire. I did not unfold my blanket all the way. I just lay on the smooth stone floor with the wool cap from Hunza under my head as a pillow, and I looked up at the faded paintings on the ceiling until I fell asleep. In my dream, the monk who had once lived in this cave came and sat beside me. He did not say anything. He just sat, and his presence was as warm as a small fire. When I woke in the morning, I felt that the monk had stayed beside me all night, without speaking, just being there. I left Bamiyan with a quietness in my body that I had not known before. A quietness that came from sitting in a cave that had once held a monk, from standing in front of a niche that had once held a Buddha, from understanding, finally, that empty does not always mean empty. I walked west out of the valley. The road west took me across more open plains, then more hills, then a long, dry stretch where I had to count my water carefully, the way I had once counted it in the Sahara. For days I saw no living thing larger than a small lizard or a bird in the sky. But I was not afraid. The land was not hostile. The land was only itself, vast and brown and patient. After many days, I came to a small ruined city beside a dry river. The walls were old, older than war, the kind of old that comes from centuries of wind and sand and slow time. I walked through what had once been the gate. I sat in what had once been the central square. I imagined the people who had lived here 1,000 years ago, before this city had begun its slow forgetting. A woman bringing water from the river in a clay jar on her head. A child running between the legs of donkeys in the market. A merchant from far away, unrolling a piece of silk for a customer to touch. All of it gone, all of it remembered. I stayed in the ruined city for one night, and in the morning I walked on. The road west became a road I no longer recognized as a road. It was just the direction I was walking, and one day I crossed an old border without knowing I had crossed it. There was no sign. There was only the feeling that the land had changed slightly in the way only the land knows how to change. I had left Afghanistan. I was in Iran. I was beginning to come home. I had walked through Iran before on my first long journey, years ago perhaps, or months ago. Time had stopped meaning what it used to mean, but this time I was walking the other way, east to west, the opposite direction, and it felt different. Walking back through a country you have already walked through is not the same as walking it the first time. The first time, everything is a question. The second time, everything is an answer. I crossed dry plains. I crossed small green valleys with streams running through them. I passed empty villages with their wooden doors standing half open. In one village, I found a small kitchen with a clay pot of dried beans on the shelf, and I cooked a simple meal that night, sitting on the stone floor the way I had sat on a stone floor in a kitchen in Anatolia in another lifetime. The taste was different, but the gesture was the same. A man alone, eating the food that strangers had left for him, years after the strangers were gone. In one place, I passed a garden with a pomegranate tree. It was not the same garden I had stayed in before, on my first journey, but it was the same kind of garden, walled, quiet, with a tree in the middle that no one had pruned for years. I sat under the pomegranate tree. I touched a flower, and I remembered the small unripe pomegranate I had given to a white horse on the steppe of Central Asia, in another country, in another year. I remembered the way the horse had taken the fruit gently from my hand and walked back to its herd. I wondered, as I sat under the tree, whether that horse was still alive somewhere, whether it had grown old, whether it remembered the man who had once held a pomegranate out for it. Probably not. Horses do not remember the way people do, but I remembered, and the remembering had a weight. A good weight, the kind of weight that does not make you tired. I walked through Iran for many days. The land slowly began to feel familiar. Not because I recognized particular places, but because the air recognized me. The wind on my face was a wind I had known before. The slope of certain hills was a slope I had walked before in the other direction. And one morning I came to a low ridge, and from the top of it I looked west. And I saw, in the very far distance, the first faint blue shapes of the mountains of eastern Anatolia. Home, or something like home. The word was not quite right, but it was the closest word I had. I sat on the ridge for a long time, looking at the distant blue shapes. I took the watch from my pocket. I opened it. I will come back to you. M. I held the watch up so it could see the mountains. Look, I said. Look, Anatolia. We are almost there. The watch ticked. Once, twice. Then a long, long pause. Then once more. The ticking had become very slow, very faint, as if the watch were saving its small remaining strength for the very end of the road. I closed the cover. I held the watch in my hand for a moment longer than usual, pressed it gently against my chest. Then I put it back in my pocket. I walked down from the ridge and continued west, toward the Blue Mountains. For days I walked toward them, and they did not seem to get any closer. Distance is a strange thing in open country. The mountains had been a thin blue line on the horizon. Then they were a thicker blue line. Then they were dark shapes I could see some detail in. Then, finally, they were close enough that I was walking among their lower hills, and at some point on a path between two hills, I crossed an old border that no one was watching. No sign, no marker. Only the feeling, again, of the land changing. I had crossed into Anatolia. I was in Turkey. The first hours in Anatolia, I walked very slowly, not because I was tired, because I wanted to feel each step. The earth here knew me, or my body remembered the earth here. I'm still not sure which is the right way to say it, but there was a recognition. The way you recognize an old room you have not been in for years. Without thinking, just by the way the air sits. I came to a small village in the southeast of Anatolia, stone houses, a small mosque, a few fig trees in the courtyards. I walked into one of the houses. The door, of course, was open. In the kitchen, on a low shelf, I found a small glass of tea, a classic Turkish tea glass, slender at the waist. The tea inside had long ago evaporated. Only a thin brown stain remained at the bottom of the glass. I picked up the glass. I held it. Someone had poured tea into this glass once. Someone had been about to drink it, and then, for some reason, they had not. The reason did not matter. The glass remained. I sat at the kitchen table with the empty glass in front of me, and I said quietly, in Turkish, "I am back." The house did not answer, but the silence around me was a Turkish silence, different from the silences of India and Pakistan and Afghanistan. The vowels of the silence were different. The way the air held the silence was different, and I knew it. My body knew it. My tongue, which had not spoken Turkish in many months, knew it. I said a few more words out loud, just to hear them, just to feel them in my mouth again. Merhaba, hoş geldin, ev, yol, ekmek, su, hello, welcome to myself, home, road, bread, water. The simplest words, the first words a child learns, and in this empty kitchen, I was a child again, saying my first words. In a language I had carried inside me all the way from one end of the earth to the other. I walked west through Anatolia for many days. I passed villages I had not seen before, and villages I might have passed once on my first journey, in the other direction. I could not always tell. The villages of central Anatolia have a way of looking like each other. Stone walls, low roofs, a minaret here, a poplar tree there, a dog, sometimes, a real living dog watching me from a doorway and then turning away. In one village, I sat by a dry fountain in the small square. I ate a piece of bread I had baked the night before, in another village, in another house. I drank water from my own bottle. A breeze moved through the square. It carried a scent of dry grass and warm stone, and, very faintly, the scent of the sea, though the sea was still many days away. In another village, I found a school, like the one I had found in India. A single room, a blackboard at the front, wooden benches in rows, but this blackboard was empty. No half-finished edition, no equation waiting for an answer. I picked up a piece of chalk that had been lying on the wooden tray beneath the blackboard, and I wrote, in Turkish, in big, careful letters, "Ev dönüyorum." I'm going home. Then I put the chalk back. I left the school. I closed the door gently behind me. If anyone ever came to this school again, in some far time, they would find a sentence on the blackboard, written by a man who had been a stranger to himself, and who had walked across the world, and who had finally remembered which direction home was in. The sentence would not explain itself, but it would be there. That was enough. I walked west. The land grew greener as I moved. The hills softened. The air sweetened. One evening I came over a low rise, and I saw in the distance the lights of something. Not real lights. There were no lights anymore, but the feeling of lights, the way the sky bent slightly in that direction, the way the air held the memory of a great human glow. The Bosphorus was that way. Istanbul was that way. I was almost home. I walked through the night, that night. I did not stop to sleep. The stars were my road. The wind at my back was a hand pushing me gently forward. My legs did not feel tired in the way they had felt tired in other countries. They felt light, as if they knew the work was almost done, as if they had been saving their last strength for this final stretch. By morning, I was walking through the outskirts of a great old city. I had arrived. The first thing I noticed about Istanbul this time was the smell of the sea. I had forgotten how strong it was. Salt, wet stone, the faint smell of seaweed at the edge of the Bosphorus, and underneath everything, the cool breath of a city built on water. I walked into the city slowly. The streets were as I had left them, or as they had been left for me by whatever it was that had emptied the world. Empty buildings, open doors, cracked pavement, grass growing between stones in places where once no grass had ever grown. But I was not afraid, I was not sad, I was not even quite alone, because the city itself was waiting for me. I walked toward the same hill I had climbed on my very first day. Many lifetimes ago, it felt now the hill where Galata Tower stood. I walked through the same narrow streets I had walked then, past the same closed shops, past the same stone buildings with their wooden balconies, past windows where once I had imagined a child running out at any moment, and now I no longer imagined that, because I had learned on this journey that imagining is a kind of love, but also a kind of weight, and I had put down the weight. The world was as it was, empty, beautiful, quiet, mine. I came to the base of Galata Tower. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the round shape of it against the sky. Then I went inside. I climbed the same narrow winding stairs I had climbed on my first day. The sound of my footsteps on the stones was the same sound. The echo was the same echo, but the man climbing was different. The first time I had climbed these stairs, I had been a man with no name, a man who had just woken in a strange room, a man who had been afraid even though he had not let himself feel the fear. The man climbing now still had no name, but he had walked across the world, and the walking had become his name. I came out at the top of the tower. Istanbul lay before me. The 7 hills, the minarets, the towers, the bridges, the wide silver curve of the Bosphorus. 2 continents holding the city between them, like cupped hands. It was the same view I had seen on my very first day, exactly the same, but this time I knew it. I knew the way the light fell on the rooftops in the morning. I knew the shape of the silence. I knew the small wind that came up from the water and lifted the air on the high places. I knew that no seagulls would call. I knew that the city had its own kind of peace now, and that the peace was deeper than any peace it had ever known when it was full. I walked to the edge of the tower, where the stone railing was. I leaned my hands on the railing. I looked out, and then I took the watch from my pocket, the same silver watch. 11 and 4. Always 11 and 4. I held it in my open palm. I held it to my ear, one last time. The ticking had stopped. I do not know exactly when it had stopped, sometime on the road back. Maybe in Iran, maybe in eastern Anatolia, maybe last night, while I was walking through the dark. I had not heard the moment, but the moment had happened. The watch had finished its small life of ticking, and it had finished it in my pocket, while I was on my way home, as if it had been waiting for that, as if the only thing it had been holding out for was to hear me cross back into the place where I had begun. I opened the cover one more time. I will come back to you, M. I read the words, and I understood. I had been M all along. The promise had been mine, to myself, to return, to this hill, to this view of an empty city, to the place where the journey had started. The watch had been a small letter I had once written to myself and forgotten, and then carried, without knowing what it said, all the way around the world, until I was ready to read it. I had read it now. I had kept the promise. I placed the watch on the stone railing of the tower, open, facing the sky. I left it there, for the wind, for the sun, for the rain, for the next traveler, whoever they might be, in whatever year, in whatever life. They would find a small silver watch on a tower in a quiet city. They would pick it up. They would hold it to their ear. They would hear nothing. And then they would read the words inside, and they would think about them, and they would maybe carry the watch with them on their own walking. The watch had been mine. Now it belonged to whoever came next. I went down the tower slowly, the same narrow stairs when I came out at the bottom. The morning had grown brighter. I walked through the streets of Istanbul. I did not go to the apartment where I had first opened my eyes. I did not need to. That place had been a beginning, and beginnings are honored by being walked away from, not by being returned to. Instead, I walked toward the Bosphorus. I came to the water at a small stone landing. There were old wooden steps leading down to the edge of the sea. I sat on the steps. I took off my shoes. I let my feet touch the cold water of the Bosphorus. The water was cold, very cold. Cold in the way the water had been cold on the shore of the Pacific at the end of my first journey. Cold in the way the glacier streams had been cold in the Karakoram. Cold in the way good water always is. I let my feet stay in the water for a long time. The wool cap from Hunza was still on my head. The book of Rumi was still in my bag. The tesbih was still in my pocket. The small archive of strangers I had been collecting all these years. I took the tesbih out. I passed the beads through my fingers, slowly. 1, 2, 3. I did not pray. I had never known a prayer. But the rhythm of the beads was a kind of prayer that did not need words. I sat by the Bosphorus and counted beads and watched the water move past me, slowly, in the morning light. A bird flew across the water, just one. Not a seagull, a different kind of bird, smaller, faster. I did not know its name, but I watched it until it disappeared on the other side of the water. And in that moment, I understood something. The journey had not been about going anywhere. The journey had been about learning to sit, to listen, to honor small things, to hold the empty niches of the world without trying to fill them, to walk for the sake of walking, to love what could not love you back, to say I see you to a stone, to a star, to a stranger's note, to a wooden horse in a courtyard in a country whose name you would forget. The journey had been a long, slow practice in being, and now the practice had brought me back to the place where I had begun. Not because the place had answers, but because the practice had become me, and I could now sit anywhere, and the sitting itself would be enough. I do not know what I will do tomorrow. Maybe I will walk again. Maybe I will not. Maybe I will stay in Istanbul for many years, in a small house by the water, and keep a small notebook, and write down the things the silence tells me. Maybe I will become the kind of old man that travelers in some far century will find in a small house, and will sit with for an evening, and will be quietly changed by without quite knowing why. Or maybe I will be gone before they come. Maybe I will only leave a notebook behind, and a wool cap, and a book of Rumi, and a tesbih on a low table beside an empty cup. Either way, I am here now. The sun rose higher above the Bosphorus. The light moved across the water, across the rooftops on the far shore, across the minarets and the domes and the old stone walls. I sat on the steps, my feet in the cold water, my hand on the tesbih, my eyes on the moving light. And I felt very simply, very quietly, the way the deepest things are always felt, that I had come home, not to a place, to a way of being in the world, a way the world had been teaching me patiently all along. Somewhere, very faintly, in the far distance, or perhaps inside me, I could not tell which anymore, I heard a few notes of a piano, the same melody I had heard in a forest in Siberia, in another life. A few notes, then silence, then a few more notes, then